Okay, we covered Tobey's movies. The next natural step forward is to cover the one and only Andrew Garfield and his two Spider-Man films, The Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2. Before I continue, I just want to spend this time to say thank you to our sponsor. We don't have a sponsor, but someone out there, please sponsor us. I mean, if this kid from Queens could get a sponsor with every Sony product possible, then we should get a sponsor, right? I mean, it makes sense. I guess it makes more sense than that. My name is Josue. Welcome to the Panic Brothers channel. Let's just do it. I won't lie to you, I think The Amazing Spider-Man is a great film. I think it does almost everything it needs to do right. Now, I was understandably upset when the news originally broke that the role of Spider-Man was going to be recasted to a new guy, but I walked into the movie theater as a very naive 16-year-old boy, and I thoroughly enjoyed the Andrew Garfield experience. I think it provided a fresh enough take on the original Spider-Man plot that actually got me engaged enough to want to know what's going to come next. I mean, the fact that we were even introduced to Peter's parents in the beginning of this film is a big enough deal on its own to really signify that this is going to be a completely different take. Not to mention that they're set up to be key players in the lore of this series of film that at the very least in this introductory film actually kind of captivates me. Like, I kind of want to know who the fuck Peter's parents are and what their place is in this big world. I'm actually sort of a fan that every major scientific plot development was geared by their impact. We wouldn't have their son turn into Spider-Man or their old lab partner turn into the Lizard were it not for them. It's honestly fascinating by how much of this plot is geared by these two. But I also understand, and I see that a lot of people don't really share the same sentiment as me though. I'm also a big fan of this Peter as well, but not for the same reasons as Tobey. Whoa, you can like two versions of the same character? That's not stupid. No way. Anyways, Tobey brought a much more grounded approach to the character. He was definitely a smart kid for sure. I mean, all three of the live action Spider-Man are, but he was more so a college student really trying to do his damn best to make it through the bullshit life has to offer, and he still managed to make it through. That element isn't present as much in Andrew Garfield's version of the character, at least not at this point. Andrew's take on the character is perhaps the smartest and most intelligent of the three, and while I can provide plenty of evidence, I think this one comparison is enough to get my point across. We see Andrew's Peter work together with Dr. Connors in this film, as opposed to Tobey's being a student, barely scraping by, really, under Dr. Connors. This Dr. Connors in The Amazing Spider-Man was stuck in a rut until Peter Parker came through. In large part due to his father's formula, but he didn't hold any punches in building his tech for the Spider-Man suit, and even building the suit itself. Tobey's handmade suit is... I don't know how the fuck he made that suit, but he made it. It's way too fucking intricate. I don't understand. Tom's homemade suit is... I mean, I can make that suit. I don't know what to tell you. But Andrew's take on the suit is so interesting because it's sort of like this blend of the two. Like, yeah, it's very intricate like Tobey's, but elements of it are very much so still homemade feeling, including his tennis shoes and sunglasses visor. I mean, I love this suit. It's so unique. I play it as it all the time in the Spider-Man PS4 game. It's one of my favorites, honestly. There's a lot to praise in this first film. The way Peter fights, the methods Peter uses to track down the Lizard, and obviously the romance between Peter and Gwen is perfect. Gwen isn't a damsel in distress like Mary Jane was, and is not unbearable like Mary Jane was. She makes you fall in love with her just as much as Peter did, and is right there in the action with Peter. She sees the Lizard giving Peter a hard time. Well, guess what? She's gonna fuck him up. There's a chemical that's going to get sprayed on New York City that's gonna turn everyone into a lizard, and only she can stop it. Well, guess what? She's gonna fucking stop it. She's a badass. I love this Gwen Stacy. I mentioned this in a YouTube short / TikTok that I uploaded where my favorite element of these films comes in the connective tissue between the two and Captain Stacy's forcing Peter to promise to back off of Gwen. I mean, he backs off, sure, but only for a little bit. We see this Peter make his biggest mistake right after Uncle Ben, and that's why I kind of have to have him up there with Tobey. But with that out of the way, let's move on to Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, we all know that this movie has received more than enough flack throughout the years, but on a rewatch, I can't lie, I really messed with this movie. Spider-Man suit is the best live action suit we've had to date. The action in this film is top notch. The music can really pull you in. This movie can legitimately be hilarious. That scene where Peter is in bed and he's acting surprised that there's no chimney in the house, like, I couldn't stop laughing at that. This is a really weird point to make, but I kind of like how Black Cat was introduced in this movie. She's clearly meant as setup for future films, but she was done so in a way where it didn't really distract from the plot. And I don't know, I just kind of respect it for that. Spider-Man shows off how much of a master he is with his powers and webs, especially in his first fight against Electro. The romance between him and Gwen seriously just continues. Perhaps others will see this as a fault, but for a lack of a better word, I kind of like how toxic Peter is in this relationship. Let's not kid ourselves, we've all been there, whether your partner was the toxic one or whether you were the toxic one. I've been there. But Peter is there right now, and seeing him navigate and learn what to do in a proper relationship and making the final decision to be there for Gwen as she moves to England on top of a bridge with the words "I love you" on display is just so fucking cute. Every single scene between the two of them, I couldn't stop smiling. They're so cute. Gwen is the best love interest out of the three films without question. Her death scene ruined me on this rewatch. Peter's reaction, like, I couldn't stop crying. It really hits, man. When you see how developed their relationship is, it really hits closer when she's gone. And it actually hurts. And I think that's what makes Peter Parker to me. We've seen the bullshit life kept giving Tobey Maguire just because that's how life works. But Peter always kept coming out on top because that's the only way you can keep on going in this life. And now we see what kind of bullshit life will give Andrew Garfield because of the poor decisions you make, how to accept responsibility for those poor decisions, and rise up from being down bad, so that way your next decision isn't as poor as the last one. The entire end sequence with Peter, Aunt May's unboxing, the graveyard, the kid, the rhino, to me, it's a masterful way to end this. I love that scene so much. It really just feels Spider-Man to me. In my humble opinion, this movie actually works a lot better when you watch it back to back with the previous film, as so much of this film relies on the ideas and the concepts and the story of the last to keep this one afloat. Continuing the storyline of Peter's parents makes a lot more sense when you remember how much it affected him in the first film. And having a lot more background as to Oscorp, the testing on the spiders in relation to healing both Norman and Harry Osborn, and how that also played a part in Peter legitimately being the only one to have access to Spider-Man's powers, as he has his father's bloodline, and how much it messed up Harry when he turned into the Green Goblin. It makes sense to me. I don't know. Meanwhile, those are all points that were used to criticize the film, but to me, when you watch it back to back, it makes sense. But all right, I feel like I'm praising these films way too much. Let's get into the negatives because there's negatives in these films. Yeah, okay, I think the first film is a good film. It's a fine film, but it just isn't bold enough and doesn't take enough nuance and gravitas of the first Tobey Maguire film. Spider-Man 1 to this day feels impactful in many ways, while Amazing Spider-Man to me just feels like another summer superhero film. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. It's very much so enjoyable. In fact, that's actually how I feel about Avengers 1. Just a regular summer superhero film. And they both came out in the same summer, funny enough. But that's about the biggest critique of the movie for me. Also, I'm aligned with everyone else on the opinion that Andrew Garfield is way too handsome to be playing Peter Parker. Like, I really don't buy the idea that he's not popular. It's really hard for me to buy that. The negatives for Amazing Spider-Man 2 for me, honestly mainly just come from the execution of its villains. I end up feeling bad for Electro as he comes across as someone with a mental disability, but he has a big heart. And life kept giving him shit. Yet, the ways in which he gets his powers is really weird to me. Maybe I missed it, but I don't understand how this pool of eels can suddenly give Max Dillon this insane power of electricity. And Ryan in this film just feels so stereotypical evil boss, and evil for no reason. I kind of feel like all the hate Ryan gives Electro in this movie could constitute a hate crime, but that's a conversation for a different video, yeah? And while I think this movie actually makes sense for Harry and Peter to be friends due to their family history, Harry is extremely unlikable. There's not much to his character that would make me think he's a badass or anything. At the least, Electro has some cool scenes with some cool music, but Harry doesn't really have any of that. He talks as if he's a lot more badass than he really is, and while I appreciate having the plot of this film surround a disease for both him and his dad that makes him get this actual Green Goblin, a more comic accurate look, it just doesn't leave a lot for me. I kind of just realized these glasses give me like a weird blue glare. In a way though, I'm actually kind of happy with where they ended the series. I think these two films back to back give a complete story for Peter Parker's progression, and it would have been hard for me to see a meaningful continuation after this point. They clearly attempted to set up the Sinister Six at the end of this film, but I have a very strong feeling it would have had little nuance or little heart, and would have focused entirely on major action sequences and spectacle. I'm sure Peter trying to rekindle a desire for love would have been somewhat interesting since we know Mary Jane was supposed to be introduced in this film, but honestly, it's a story that we don't really need to see. I'm happy with these two films. I think these movies are actually really good, and I kind of have them higher on my list compared to what you or a majority of people would have them at. And at this point, I actually think I like the second Andrew Maguire movie more than the first one. That seems sacrilegious, but I said it. Alright, that's enough from me, folks. What do y'all think? Do y'all love or hate the Andrew Maguire movies? Andrew Maguire? There's only one more day until No Way Home comes out. When I see Andrew Garfield in the movie, I'm gonna go crazy. Alright, y'all, it's been real. Till next time.